The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. On this Wednesday, March 11th, I hope everybody is doing well. And so I'll continue updating you on the one Iran today. We'll cover a few more stories. I want to bring in kind of a broader perspective on all of this. So we'll talk about kind of 9/11 and how that has played into where we are today, and the attitudes towards the war as a consequence of Iraq War, the Iraq War, and the inability of people to perceive or even imagine victory in a war, given what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. First, just a pretty stunning story out of California. The FBI has issued a warning to law enforcement agencies in California, stating that they have recent intelligence that indicates that Iran is allegedly aspired to conduct a surprise attack using unmanned aerial vehicles from an unidentified vessel off the coast of the United States, specifically against unspecified targets in California. So somebody in the FBI discovered something where the Iranians, somebody unspecified, has said that an unspecified boat will send unspecified drones to an unspecified location in California. So not much there, not much to go on, but yeah, it does give you one a sense that it could be done. I mean, a disguised fishing boat, any kind of other boat could I guess cross the Pacific and go off the shore of California and launch a drone from a couple of hundred miles away and attack California. I get a sense that if that happened, Americans would rally around this war a little bit more. So maybe it would be good, but I doubt it. And plus, I have too many friends, loved ones, people I care about in California that I don't want to see hurt. So I hope this is all a hoax or unreal, or the Iranians have changed their mind or whatever, or the boat sunk, whatever happened. Hopefully, no drones are going to hit California. But it does tell you. I mean, it's possible. It's true. None of the ballistic missiles the Iranians have could hit the United States, and none of their drones can travel the distance of the United States. But they're so easy to launch that you could really imagine that on a small boat they could attack the United States, the homeland of the United States. But this sounds pretty unspecific, except for the California part. Except for the California part. Now, it would be nice if we knew exactly when California was going to happen as well. But given everything else is unspecific, I guess I'm not surprised that that is not there. Yeah, I mean, the war continues. The daily bombing runs of targets in Iran continue. Hezbollah this evening actually has significantly intensified their rocket attacks against Israel, and in something that is, I would say, surprising. It looks like it was coordinated with the Iranians. So most accounts out of Israel were, we've cut the communication between Hezbollah and Iran. Hezbollah is isolated. Well, no, they haven't. It seems like the attack this evening was coordinated. I actually spoke to my dad about, 40 minutes ago. And he was in the air raid shelter. Sirens were going off. I could hear them in the background. And he and my mom and their caregivers, 4 people, in this tiny little room, which serves as their air shelter, in their apartment in Haifa, in the north of Israel, facing facing Lebanon. So they face. You can actually, on a clear day, you can see Lebanon from their apartment. But anyway, it turns out that not only had Iran launched, a small number of ballistic missiles towards the north of Israel, Hezbollah launched about 100 different types of short-range missiles into the north of Israel. And the Iron Dome, the Israeli air defense system for the kind of short-range missiles, was intensely at work. I assume the new laser defense system was working as well, although there's very little verification that Israel. There's no official word about how extensively Israel is using that. But yeah, 100 projectiles out of the Hezbollah in Lebanon. I think that if Israel was hesitating about whether to expand the war in Lebanon, if Israel was hesitating about whether to, this was it, whether to go into Lebanon and completely dismantle Hezbollah, I think this latest barrage has tilted that clearly in favor of this needs to be it. Whatever happens to the war in Iran, the war in Lebanon will continue should continue, I hope it continues, and I think Israel's now dedicated to it continuing until Hezbollah is finished. Until basically Israel can hand over whatever's remnants of Hezbollah to the Lebanese government, and the Lebanese government will be strong enough, given how weak Hezbollah will be, to take them over. Now, we will see whether that happens, but I expect a significant ground incursion into Lebanon tonight or tomorrow, with the troops have been called up from the south to participate in that ground incursion. So the number of troops on the northern border has increased significantly as Israel prepares for a massive incursion into South Lebanon. As I've said since October 7th, Israel needs to occupy Lebanon up until the Litani River. If the Lebanese government cannot handle Hezbollah, if the Lebanese government cannot secure its southern border with Israel, then that leaves no option but for Israel to do it for the Lebanese government. And that means Israel needs to take the entire southern Lebanon, at least for now, and occupy the entire territory. They've already, asked for the evacuation of most civilians. Supposedly there are about 600,000 at least civilians that have left their homes in Lebanon, and most of those are from southern Lebanon. Israel needs to occupy the entire place and then slowly because I think it's going to take slow work, dismantle Hezbollah's infrastructure in southern Lebanon. This is very similar infrastructure to what Hamas had. The real threat post-October 7th from Hezbollah in the north is something like what Hamas did in the south, just a massive invasion into Israel, just overwhelming, quick, slaughter, rape, torture, just of Israeli civilians in the northern border. And Israel cannot allow that ever to happen again. And I think as part of that, Israel's going to have to create a buffer zone at the beginning. To start that off, they need to take the entire southern part of Lebanon, again, up until the Litani River. And Israeli forces might have to go further north to, again, dismantle the rest of Hezbollah's infrastructure. As long as the Lebanese army won't do it, Israel has to do it. And, I'm hoping the Trump administration leaves them alone, but lets them actually engage in it. But yes, I think this current barrage of rocket fire, 100, which is the most they've done this particular war. They did a lot more during the Gaza war, but now this is the largest. Basically, it means Israel has, I think, no choice but to act, and I expect they will imminently. I think if not tonight, then tomorrow night or tomorrow during the day, I expect the invasion to go forward and into southern Lebanon. At the same time, the Air Force is attacking, of course, launches from where these rockets were fired. They're attacking strategic locations of Hezbollah all over Lebanon, and all at the same time as doing what they're doing in Iran at the same time. So Israel's got whereas the United States has a one-front war, Israel has a two-front war. Its pilots unbelievably busy, and I think moving now forward, you're going to see ground troops as well, boots on the ground. There will be boots on the ground, Israeli boots on the ground in Lebanon, and maybe there will be boots on the ground in Iran. We'll see. I think you're not going to be able to win this war. You're not going to be able to get resolution in Iran without boots on the ground in Iran. Not massive troops, but at least special forces troops on the ground. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But really, there's this massive resistance. Every time somebody says boots on the ground, there's almost this immediate convulsion within the American public and intellectuals and the press and everybody. No, we can't do boots on the ground. Remember Iraq, remember Afghanistan. And there's no question, Iraq and Afghanistan are such extensive failures, were such disasters over the long run, that the appetite for actually engaging in a war that might lead to victory is gone. After 9/11, I and many others in the Objectivist movement, at least, Lena Peikoff primarily, but the Institute, argued that the real target should not be Iraq. The real target was Iran. And we were told at the time, no, Iran, powerful, very, very strong. You could never take Iran. I mean, Iraq, okay, but Iran, no. Iraq, everybody kind of depreciated their ability to fight because in the first Gulf War in 1991, the United States just ran them over. I mean, there was no contest. And I argued that if Iraq is weak, Iran is probably weaker, or at least as weak. That at the time, there was zero reason to assume that Iran was strong. I mean, and what we're seeing right now is how weak Iran is now. And it was much, much weaker back then. It didn't have anywhere near the kind of ballistic missiles, the drones, all these technologies didn't exist. They just had a regular army. And remember, the Iranian army fought a bloody, horrific 8-year war with the Iranian army, fought an 8-year war with the Iraqi army to a stalemate. So it's not the Iranians were so powerful they overran the Iraqis. No, the Iranians were matched to the Iraqis. Both armies unbelievably incompetent. Both armies lost. Iran lost hundreds of thousands of troops, including a lot of children, which they sent into battle in suicide missions. Indeed, to this day, the Iranian regime has a venerates this poster of this child, a kid, who wrapped explosives to his body and crawled under a tank and set them off. It's the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of jihad, for the sake of Iran, for the sake of Islamism. That is, by the way, who we're dealing with here. We're dealing with a barbaric regime. Anyway, after 9/11, they could have gone to Iran and they didn't. And the reason they didn't, and the reason the whole Iraq war became a catastrophe, I mean, everything after 9/11 really was a catastrophe, is because they wouldn't identify who the enemy actually was. They refused to make the argument that Islam was the enemy, that Islamism was the enemy. That would make it a religious war. Indeed, the opposite. George Bush told us that Islam was a religion of peace that had been hijacked by a small minority of people, happen to be members of Al-Qaeda. I mean, the damage George Bush did to this country is really it's hard to imagine. I mean, I think again, we saw it at the time at the Institute, and we warned against this, right? He taught Americans you can't win wars because of the way he fought them, tying the military's hands behind their backs, restricting their target lists, not having a real plan for wanting regime change, but not having a real plan for what regime would look after the fact, going to Afghanistan, but again, not really having a plan, not really knowing what to do, not having a mechanism by which to defeat the Taliban if that was the goal. So what George Bush has done is he has basically convinced American people that America cannot win wars. And it is weak. As a consequence, we believe that Iran is much stronger than it is, that America is much weaker than it is. I mean, there's also altruism that plays into that, right? I mean, altruism will tell you that evil is strong. Evil is strong. Why is evil strong? And the good is weak. Because the good, according to altruism, is the sacrificial. The good is those who are willing to sacrifice for others. That is, by definition, weak. Evil is that which is willing to sacrifice others to self. That which is willing to do anything to win. They are strong. We should be afraid of evil. When the reality is, evil is impotent. And particularly evil is impotent in the face of the strong. Now, it is true that, Korea and Vietnam did not help this attitude of America can't win wars, but there was a chance after 9/11. And we were attacked, and the entire American people, not like Vietnam, for example, American people overwhelmingly supported a war of self-defense after 9/11. And relevant to today, it was in the Middle East. And relevant to today, the real enemy, not the enemy we actually fought, but the real enemy was Islam, or Islamists. So the impact of Iraq and Afghanistan is much, much, much greater with regard to the attitude towards war today, particularly in the Middle East, than Vietnam and Korea. Plus, it's a generational thing. Everybody remembers Iraq and Afghanistan. They've already forgotten. And remember, in 2001, after 9/11, the American people rallied around Bush. He could have done pretty much anything. His approval rating, not like Donald Trump, whose approval rating are very, very low. Bush's approval rating right after 9/11 were in the 80+%. He could have done anything. What he chose to do was to lose. What he chose was to lose, was to fight an altruistic war in the wrong place, for the wrong reasons, with the wrong outcome. And the consequence of that was not winning. And indeed, I think today the attitude generally is victory is impossible. Can't win. We can degrade, we can do certain things, we can upset, we can achieve certain aims. We can't win, though. Victory is impossible. Partially because we don't even know how. I mean, imagine if Trump had said, I'm not stopping this until there's regime change in Iran, and not just any regime change. I want to free Iran because that is the only way I know America will be secure. Not because I'm sacrificing American troops to liberate Iranians, but because the only way to make America secure, California, for example, is to fundamentally change the regime in Iran from where it is today to a free country. Free countries don't attack other free countries generally. Imagine a president saying that. And we will bomb them. We will do what is necessary to bring about that outcome. But there's no such attitude. And note that no real long-term victory is possible without that attitude. Because, the regime in Iran are not Venezuela. They're not just thugs. By the way, good op-ed today by Ben Baer and Ilan Jono in the Orange County Register. You can find it online about the religious nature of the Iranian regime. Why it's different than Venezuela. Venezuela is just thugs. You can get rid of the top thug and cut a deal with the second in command. Iran is not thugs. They are ideologues. They are committed ideologues. They are religious fanatics. Maybe not everybody, but enough. And they too believe that America is weak. They believe America is weak because America acts weak. I mean, Israel bombs the fuel reserves of the Iranians. America chides the Israelis for doing that. Don't do that again. We don't want to hurt their infrastructure. We don't want to actually bring pain to the Iranians. How are you going to win if you're not willing to bring pain to the enemy population? So, all the lessons, all the lies of 9/11, all the lessons that we're taught from that, the bad way in which those wars were fought, which is continuing right now, all of that is impacting what's going on now. And look, Iran is much easier than Iraq. It's easier than Iraq because it has a population that doesn't like the leader. It's easier than Iraq because it has a population that actually likes the West. I mean, we could achieve victory by accident here. That is, it could turn out that the Iranian people are, brave enough, courageous enough, and powerful enough to overthrow this regime once we're done with him. And, at the end of the day, at the end of this war, we will be safer because many of the Iranian capabilities will be destroyed. How many of them, will they take out the nuclear program or not? All of that is to be determined. But we're not fighting for victory. We're not fighting for that. It might be an accidental outcome. And our leadership at the top, while has done some good things, right? Going to war with Iran was a good thing. So I'll give Trump credit for that. And here's a big one. Ankar Gate today pointed this out, and I thought, I thought this, but I guess when he said it, it really hit. One of the great achievements of this war, from the Trump administration perspective, is partnering with Israel. In the first Gulf War, George Bush Sr. amassed troops, remember, a coalition, huge coalition of troops, along the Kuwait border to kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait in 1991. And purposely did not invite the Israelis to participate, even though Israel had the most competent army and so on. In addition, when Saddam Hussein started firing missiles into Israel at the time, this 91, and Israel had no air defense system. Missiles were just dropping into Israel. They were smaller than the ballistic missiles today, but they were still dropping into Israel, killing people, destroying property. Israel was not allowed to retaliate. It was not allowed to fly into Iraq and destroy the missile launches. And indeed, in those days, there was fear that Saddam Hussein would use chemical weapons against Israel. And still, Israel was not allowed to defend itself. Everybody had gas masks with them, just in case. In 2003, war with Iraq, the United States did not have, the coalition of the willing. Well, Israel was willing, but not invited. Not invited. And again, not allowed to defend itself in any kind of way. I'll give Trump credit. This war, they've embraced the Israelis. They are partners. They are doing this together. They're not shying away. They're not succumbing to the Arab world being upset that Israel is attacking a Muslim country. They're just, it's just a given. And that's a huge achievement. That is a massive achievement, and that's probably maybe the best thing coming out of this war. And indeed, I think Israel is much more strategic about this war than the United States is. So to the extent that their strategy, it's coming from the Israelis, not from the Americans. And this, of course, brings me to the point that I've mentioned a number of times over the previous few days, but it needs to be emphasized and be said again. In spite of the success of the American military, which I had no doubt, the weakness of the Iranian regime, which I had no doubt, it is truly, it's constantly truly a shock, the extent to which the United States was not prepared for key things. First and foremost, the blocking of the Hormuz Straits. Somebody challenged me the other day and said, "Oh, you think the Pentagon doesn't have a plan? You don't know what you're talking about, Yaron. Of course, the Pentagon has a plan. You think you know more than the Pentagon, da 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 da." Where's the plan? The American Navy has been asked repeatedly, pretty much every day since the war began, by particular shipping companies and ships in the Persian Gulf to provide an escort through the Hormuz Straits. And the Navy has refused, not wanting to put its ships in danger. As we know, Iran started mining the Hormuz Straits yesterday. We don't know for how long it mined. And by some stories, they only managed to put out like 10 mines, which are not very significant. And then, only then, did the Trump administration order the Air Force to take out the mining boats. These are small boats that can drop 2 to 3 mines at a time. And they've taken out, 10, 20 of those boats. Why is that an afterthought? Why wasn't that the beginning? Well, primarily because the Trump administration did not expect. They did not expect Iran to resist. They did not expect Iran to block the Hormuz Straits, and therefore they had no plan. They literally had no plan. And right now they're winging it. I know, you can't believe it. There's smart people at the Pentagon. I'm sure the generals had some ideas of what they would like to do, but no plan was approved on how to deal with Hormuz Straits. The Trump administration believed that the war would have very little impact on oil prices. And yet, it's had profound impact on oil prices. It's truly shocking how badly, from a strategic perspective, much of what the United States has done is, in spite of the fact that they're bombing, they're destroying, and it's a free, it's a turkey shoot, right? They can go out there and shoot anything they want. There's no air defense systems. Today, 3 ships trying to cross the Hormuz Straits were hit, including one Thai ship off the coast of Oman. So the Iranians are serious about blocking the straits. They've realized, whether they realized this from day one or whether it's taken them a few days to realize it, they realize that their biggest weapon against the United States, the most powerful weapon against the United States, is oil prices. If they can get oil prices to 200, all bets are off. Global recession, whatever. That's what they're aiming for. Iran's Islamic Republic News Agency reported that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has attacked a Thai-flagged bulk carrier in the Straits of Hormuz for failing to heed their warning not to transit. Now, again, it's hard to tell how many ships are getting through and how many ships are not. And the Wall Street Journal had a story saying Iranian ships carrying oil are moving out of the Hormuz Strait at a faster rate than they were before the war. And you think to yourself, wait a minute. Why isn't the United States stopping that? Why are we letting Iran continue to export oil while Iran doesn't allow anybody else to export oil? That doesn't make any sense from a strategic perspective. Why aren't we stopping the Iranian ships taking oil out of the Hormuz Straits and forcing them to turn around and go back home? I mean, it's unthinkable that Iran is now benefiting from the spike in oil prices because they have the power, whereas we have the mightiest navy in the world right at their doorstep doing what? It's truly mind-boggling and head-scratching. But this is a consequence of not really thinking this through, not having a plan in terms of what to do, with the Hormuz Straits, what to do with the oil. The United States told Israel not to hit oil depots inside Iran. But Iran just launched a drone attack onto the oil depots in Oman. And they were on fire, huge quantity of oil on fire, sending a message to the entire Gulf. They're trying to strike Saudi oil fields, Saudi refineries. I mean, there's enough air defense systems to knock those out, but they're trying to destroy the oil industry in the Gulf. And yet, the U.S. and Israel will not attack oil facilities in Iran. Why not starve the Iranians? Why is the island still there loading up oil and allowing it to be shipped? It's mind-boggling. Oil prices continue to go up and down as a consequence of all of this. They're at, I think, 87 last time I looked. Again, they were around 60 not that long ago before the war. But I was just looking at oil prices. We will, 87.69 right now. 87.73, so they're fluctuating around 87, 88. They were as low as 80 earlier today. So moving around a lot. 80, 83 earlier today. 80 yesterday. Moving around a lot, within a band between 80 and 90, it seems. Which is not bad relative to where it looked like it might go a few days ago. So, and part of this is that the IEA, which is the International Energy Agency, which coordinates internationally, they have decided, I guess the agency is out of Paris, they have said that the member countries are going to release 400 million barrels of oil from emergency stocks. So this is the strategic reserves. They're going to be opened up. We're going to see 400 million barrels from European countries and other countries being released in order to help stabilize the price of oil and make sure it doesn't go up, above 100. The release of the oil would more than double the agency's biggest prior release, which was in 2022 after the Russians invaded Ukraine. So this would be more than that. In that point, 182 million barrels were put on the market. This is all intended to counter the massive disruptions caused in the Strait of Hormuz. Again, why isn't there a plan? Why wasn't there a plan? And if there is a plan, why hasn't it been implemented? You think that would be one of the first things the U.S. does? Bomb Iran while securing the Hormuz Strait. But this is a problem of Trump running this war. They're not thinkers. They're not planners. They're not strategists. So yes, the IEA was created in 1974 after the oil embargo of 73, which is Saudi oil embargo because of the Yom Kippur War. It's a club of 32 Western nations and some allies and each nation has their own reserve, and they are releasing a significant part of that reserve out into the world. The Japanese, for example, will unilaterally release oil from their strategic reserve as soon as Monday, so next week. They will release 15 days worth of oil from private sector stockpiles and another 30 days worth from government reserves. The Germans said Germany would participate out of solidarity with other members. So, we can expect, again, 400 million barrels. That's a lot of oil to help keep the price relatively within check and away from above 100 and certainly away from the 200, which is what I think the Iranians would like it to reach. The West is acting to try to solve this, but the real solution, of course, is to end this war quickly. But for that, we'd have to be a lot more ruthless. But in the short run, to secure the Hormuz Straits, which again doesn't seem like to be in the plan, doesn't seem to be something the U.S. military wants to do. Again, according to the Wall Street Journal, Iran is exporting more oil through the Strait of Hormuz now than before the war started. That is, to me, stunning that we're letting that happen and we're not stopping it. Because that's money. It's money in the bank. And it'll be interesting if the fact that they just attacked the Oman oil tanks will change Trump's attitude. Well, he'll respond to that. By the way, the lack of oil or the high price of oil affects fertilizer. Fertilizers made from oil ultimately, and that market is being hurt. So we will see. As I've already told you, the Saudis are going to be pumping oil west, so they're going to get around the Straits of Hormuz. But that is obviously taking them time to get that ramped up. The Iranians. For the Iranians, the only cards they have right now is oil. The only card they have is to destroy or to do damage to the oil industry in the Gulf states and to cause oil prices to spike. That's the only weapon they have because they can't compete militarily. Right? They can't do damage. They're not doing any damage to the U.S. They're doing damage in the Gulf, but even then, not a lot of damage, particularly as compared to what's happening in Iran. By the way, in Iran, one of the targets last night was one of Iran's largest banks, its data center, Bank Sepa. Its data center was attacked. This is the bank that pays salaries to all regime forces. And the Iranians have already announced that its soldiers, members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, should not expect paychecks anytime soon. So the data center for the main bank of the Iranian regime that pays salaries to its military is being bombed. It's being destroyed. I assume they have backup, but it's going to take a while to get the backup going. Right? The Iranians themselves. The population in Iran, at least, we don't have polls or anything like that, but certainly people that Western journalists are talking to seem to be supportive of the bombing regime. Right? Here's from one, this is from the New York Times, who talked to an engineer in Tehran. It says, the experience of being bombed is even more terrifying because the government is sharing little information and sending few alerts, said Ali, an engineer in Tehran. Ordinary Iranians are cut off from the internet. And Ali said people had resorted to calling friends and relatives in areas where they saw fighter jets headed. The ferocity of the attacks has divided sentiment among opponents of the government after a brutal crackdown on nationwide protests by security forces last January, where thousands were killed. This is a quote from the engineer. Some people are comfortable with the bombing. I know that may sound strange, said Ali. They're upset if there is a night without bombing and fear the war might end while the regime remains. You can see this clearly people say we have already paid enough of a price and the Islamic Republic must go. Ali said he was sympathetic to that view. Our lives have no value for the Islamic Republic, he said. We are the government's human shield. And that's true. And but it's good to see that the Iranian people still have that spirit of a fight in them. Let's see. Yeah, it's so, again, everything continues. Bombing continues as we speak. There's no stop. The Iranians are claiming the Trump administration keeps reaching out to them with offers of negotiations and potential peace. This is Ali Larijani, the guy probably running the war effort, given that the supreme leader is probably injured and not in the center of things. He's the Iranian head of National Security Council. He said, quote, "Tonight we received messages from the United States president through the Omani mediator." These are the same Omanis who just got bombed, requesting that we negotiate a ceasefire. Our response is that we will not accept any negotiations as long as an entity called Israel exists. If that's the case, they'll never accept negotiations, ever. So anyway, as I told you, the Israelis, particularly the Israelis, but also the Americans, seem to be targeting all the kind of regime facilities, the Basij, the IRGC, anything that the Iranians could use to suppress their own people are targets now, particularly in Western Iran, particularly in Kurdish areas, with the idea that maybe that's where it would start, where an uprising. These are areas in which there was a lot of demonstrations during the uprising in January. This is where a lot of the people were killed. A lot of the just mowing demonstrators down was happening. And so Israel in particular is taking out all the regime facilities that make that possible. They attack any of the headquarters, both in the Kurdish and the Azeri areas. This is in the west and in the northwest of Iran. These are groups that might rally more aggressively to getting rid of the regime. All right, the war continues. I don't see how it ends. I don't know. I think the Trump administration negotiating is going to demand turning over all the nuclear material and ending the nuclear program. The Iranians were not willing to do that before the war started. I don't think they're willing to do it now. I really do think that, Trump constantly saying it's going to end today, it's going to do this, and the general attitude of most intellectuals in America that are anti-war, that are anti this war, the media's anti the war, the general attitude that seems to exist that this war is failing. My sense is that all of that emboldens the Iranians and basically has convinced them not to compromise, to keep going, to do everything they can to drive that price of oil up to over 100, and to hope that the ongoing pressure on the administration will cause the United States to back off of this war unilaterally and leave the Iranians with their nuclear program and leave the Iranians with whatever they have left. I don't think they're at a point yet, and maybe they'll never be, because remember, this is the thing Trump doesn't understand. And this is the thing Bush didn't understand. And this is the thing Americans don't understand, generally. These are religious fanatics. They're willing to die for the cause. This is why they should never be allowed to have nuclear weapons. This is why they're different than North Korea and the Soviet Union and the Chinese. These people would use it because they don't care about dying. They don't care about the retaliation. We just saw one supreme leader gone, next supreme leader. He'll be gone, they'll appoint another one. Now, some people in the regime care, and that's who you hope will ultimately cause some kind of overthrow of the current regime. But the leaders of this regime are Islamic fanatics who do not care and therefore will fight to the death. And if they fight to the death, they're not going to negotiate away the one thing that they know in the future could protect them, which is a nuclear weapon. They're going to fight to the death to keep it. And given how vulnerable they think the United States and how weak they think America is, not militarily, but spiritually, in terms of commitment, in terms of ability to fight a prolonged war, willingness to fight a prolonged war, not ability, willingness. Given all the stories about how America's running out of ammunition and it can't do it and the war's not popular and this will cause the Republicans to lose in the midterms and all this stuff, why would they stop? Why would they stop? So, the only way for this to end positively, it's going to end positively no matter what, because Iran will be weakened no matter what. But regime change is the one way you secure that. And short of regime change, the United States better have a plan to do two things that are going to be necessary in the next couple of weeks. One, open up the Straits of Hormuz. I don't think they still have a plan. And two, find that enriched uranium and get it out of there. The latest report I saw is that half of it is buried under Isfahan, and maybe there's a way to get to it, and then others are scattered. Some of it is buried under Fordow. You probably couldn't get to that. It's buried too deep. And some of it is in some lab somewhere. You'd think that would be a priority, because once they get the nuclear material out, then, you'd think they can negotiate, because then, Trump can declare victory and actually negotiate. As long as they have the nuclear material in Iran, Trump cannot declare victory. Cannot declare victory. Anyway, that is my assessment today of the war. Again, it's going as well as a war from the air can go. It's sad that Americans have, given the nature of this war and the importance of this war, that Americans are so hesitant to put boots on the ground. I think taking Karag Island, the island where all the oil facilities are, would really change the dynamics of this war. Putting boots on the ground to try to find the nuclear material and get it out would change the nature of the war. I think both of those are possible, but they would require courage on the part of our political and military leadership, which I don't think they have. And again, so much of our country is opposed to boots, not bets, boots on the ground, to putting soldiers on Iranian territory. Needs to happen. Special forces, paratroopers, whatever it needs to be. I don't think they have to go to Tehran, the island, secure the nuclear materials, and maybe other missions here and there to help with regime change. But it has to happen. And this fear, again, from Iraq and Afghanistan, where we fought so pathetically because of rules of engagement, we need to get over it. We need to fight properly, and we need to do what we need to do to win this. The more you drag it out, the weaker Iran will be at the end of it, no question about that. That's a plus, I guess. But the more desperate they will be to get nukes. The other option, of course, is for them to get a nuke from the Russians, or the Chinese could give them a nuke. This is why there's so many bad outcomes potentially post-war, that regime change is the one thing that actually secures this long term. And it's the one thing everybody wants to take off the table, because nobody wants to commit to it. I mean, if there's a hint that the Russians or Chinese are going to provide them with a nuke, we'll have another war. I mean, they'll have to do this again. And I'm not sure the U.S. will be up to it. Israel might have to do it alone. All right. Let's see. Okay, let's talk a little bit. We've got a few other stories. We'll go through this fairly fast. Let's start with Taiwan. Taiwan is looking at what's going on. And what Taiwan is trying to turn itself into, if you will, is what it calls a porcupine island. An island with, what do you call the things that a porcupine has? Whatever those things are. Basically, enough defense capabilities. They can't go on the offense. Enough defense capabilities to deter an invasion. That means that Taiwan will probably soon have, or maybe already has, the highest density of anti-ship missiles in the world. They'll have over 1,000 U.S. and Taiwanese-made anti-ship missiles along their coasts. 1,000 of these missiles. Unless the Chinese have a really good way of knocking these out of the sky, maybe they do. This should serve as a strong deterrent. They're investing heavily in air defense systems to try to deter the Chinese Air Force from attacking Taiwan and destroying these ship missiles. I mean, you have to defend these missiles from attack from the air, attack from drones. So they're investing heavily in drone technology, anti-drone technology, anti-ballistic missile technology, anti-cruise missile technology, and at the same time, anti-ship missiles. Suppose the U.S. has supplied them with Harpoon missiles, land-based Harpoon missiles, and they have over 1,400 total anti-ship missiles that they have arrayed, and they are planning to produce more, build more, and create a massive inventory for these things. Again, at the same time as figuring out how to defend themselves from air attack which would take out their Harpoon systems that fire these missiles to sea. So Taiwan is looking at this and figuring out how can it defend itself. How can it defend itself? Which is not going to be easy. At the same time, the Japanese are going to be deploying a land-to-land missiles. It's called the 1,000-kilometer range Type 12 missiles on the Japanese islands not far from Taiwan. But what this will do is will put China's mainland within reach of these missiles. Now, Beijing has threatened, don't do this. It's wagged its finger at the Japanese. But the Japanese right now have a tough prime minister who is dedicated to defending Japan and defending Taiwan if need be. And by putting missiles on the islands close to Taiwan, they will be able to hit the coastline of China, which is significant. Again, the more the United States gets its allies like Japan, like South Korea, to actually be willing to deploy weapons that pose a real threat to the Chinese, the more likely you are to deter the Chinese from ever trying to invade Taiwan, because they won't want to risk it. I mean, Japan has the second or third best Navy in the world, probably. It depends on whether you rank it above the Chinese or below the Chinese. But it's certainly a large and formidable Navy. It's large. It's got many submarines. They're very advanced submarines. It's got aircraft carriers. It's got battleship. It's got the whole array of ships, and they're super advanced, super technologically advanced. Japan is investing heavily in defense right now. That eastern part of the Pacific, you're going to see there's going to be a lot of action there in an attempt to deter China for invading Taiwan. Now, because that's when, you know, if you're going to have a World War III, it's more likely to be over Taiwan than it is in the Middle East or over Ukraine. Because the stakes are so high, and the players are there, well armed, and of course the United States gets into direct confrontation with China over that. Potentially, that could be a disaster. So, deterrence is the name of the game, and the more missiles you can put that are in range to destroy Chinese ships or to reach the Chinese mainland, the better. And Japan here will play a huge role in that. And the Japanese Navy will play a huge role in that. Particularly submarines. Kudababa Daba says they have 22 subs. And I think some of the subs have like electric motors, which makes them super quiet. So, yeah, I mean, interesting stuff. Okay, let's see. I talked yesterday about this new tax in Washington, and the tax passed, right? So it passed their first income tax. This is the first income tax ever in the history of the state of Washington. Only people making over $1 million a year will pay it. It'll be 9.9%, so it'll make it one of the highest tax rates in the country at a state tax. Married couples share a single $1 million exemption. So basically, everybody files. You get $1 million exemption, and you pay 9.9 on anything above that. So if your combined income is more than $1 million, you get tax. There are a lot of people in Washington State that make over $1 million. A lot of successful people at Amazon and at Microsoft and at all the different spin-outs and startups that provide the infrastructure for them, the ecosystem that they've created, including, you know, a lot of millionaires at Starbucks. So, you know, this probably means that Washington State will have an income tax for people making less than $1 million soon, right? Once you establish it, once the income tax is there, it's very easy to lower the threshold as the need with capital N for money increases, because the more money the state can milk its people, the more need it has for money. You know, people excited. Who are excited? People who never hope to ever make $1 million or more, or never hope to make a lot of money, generally, even not $1 million. Because again, this threshold is going to be dropped. You know, middle-class people are going to stay middle class because getting wealthy is going to be really difficult. Another 10% off the top. Again, this is above and beyond the federal tax. This is California level of taxation for millionaires. California is 13%. This is 10. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a major disincentive for building wealth in Washington State. And it probably means people are going to leave. And we've got our first announced departure. Starbucks founder, the founder of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, announced he is leaving his longtime home of Seattle and moving to Florida, given this new income tax. Now, remember, Howard Schultz is a big-time Democrat, a big-time, you know, supporter of democratic causes. It doesn't matter. He still doesn't want to pay the millionaire tax. He can afford it. He still doesn't want to pay it. So he's been in the Pacific Northwest for 44 years and he is off to Florida. You know, maybe the weather had something to do with it, but I suspect it's not the only thing. By the way, Starbucks, which has been forever located in Seattle forever, is also moving out of Seattle in terms of its headquarters and moving, I think, to Tennessee. They're relocating to Tennessee, right? So yes, I mean, he's got a long statement about his moving. It doesn't really mention the tax, right? He says, like many other Seattle-based companies, Starbucks today stands on the shoulders of many Pacific Northwesterners who built the company. They helped shape the culture, the benefits, and the brand, contributed to the civic community and the public life of the city and state. It is our hope that Washington, listen to this, will remain a place for business and entrepreneurship to thrive, creating essential opportunities for those in Seattle and surrounding areas. Well, maybe not. If Starbucks itself is moving out because Seattle and more broadly the state of Washington are becoming less and less friendly to business and less friendly to entrepreneurs who want to become millionaires. Yeah, pretty sad. Sad for Seattle. I mean, tax went from 0 to 10%, just overnight. By the way, at the same time, in South Carolina, a bill to phase out South Carolina's income tax completely, which is, I think, more important than phasing out the property tax in Florida. A bill to phase out South Carolina's income tax completely passed in the second chamber. It looks like it'll pass. South Carolina will join Florida and Tennessee and some other in Texas as a state with no income tax, while Washington will leave that small group of states with no income tax and join the group of states with an income tax. With an income tax. By the way, if you look at movement, Howard Schultz just left Washington State. Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, Peter Thiel, and many others have left California. And they've left California because of this wealth tax that the Californians want to pass. And the latest poll shows that the wealth tax is likely to pass. It's going to be a referendum, and Californians are probably going to vote for a wealth tax. And it's going to be a freaking disaster for entrepreneurship in California. It's a wealth tax only on billionaires, so don't worry. Very few of my listeners are billionaires, so you're safe. But the billionaires are all leaving. So, the founders of Google and Facebook and Peter Thiel and many others. Supposedly half the billionaires in the state of California have left or are leaving. That's pretty amazing. All right, let's see. So, there's always a question of when and where is the next financial crisis going to happen? Where is the weak spot in the financial industry? And it's very difficult to predict these things. And, and I'm not particularly good at it necessarily. But I do find it interesting right now that there are problems within the world of finance right now. And those problems are primarily in what's called private lending, private debt. So traditionally, historically, banks have been the ones that lend money. You go to the bank and you borrow money, and businesses borrowed money from banks. And banks develop an expertise on how to deal with it and how to manage it. There have been crises in the banks over issues of debt, but most of those have been around mortgages and sharp changes in interest rates. The reality is that banks are very good in terms of business lending. And there'd be no real systemic crises around the country, around the banking industry and, business loans. But Dodd-Frank, which is this massive, horrendous, horrific banking regulation bill that passed Congress after the financial crisis, one of the things that it does is it disincentivizes banks from doing business loans. What it really does is encourages banks to take in deposits and buy and buy government securities and not get into the business of loaning money, particularly not to businesses. Now, to fill in the gap, because businesses still need money, what you've had is a massive industry has been created, which is a private industry, private equity, that is making loans to businesses all across the country. And it's always been a question about whether how much expertise that they have. How easy is it for them to replace banks? How good is their underwriting? Underwriting is the process by which you evaluate a loan's riskiness and ability of the borrower to pay you back. How robust is all of that? And it has not been clear. And over the last couple of weeks, we've seen a number of indications of, call it strain, in the private debt, private credit market. This could be a result of sloppy underwriting. It could just be because of some shocks to the system that have to do with AI and software companies. And we've seen a lot of asset managers, BlackRock, for example, and others, restrict access to some of their funds, not allow withdrawal from their funds. JP Morgan Chase today is basically marking down the collateral held by its private credit firms. So it lends money, it's a bank, it lends money to private credit firms who then lend money to businesses. That turns out to be better for JP Morgan regulatory-wise than JP Morgan lending directly to the businesses. That's the kind of regulatory insanity that we live under and our banking regulations encourage. So what we're seeing now is that JP Morgan Chase is marking down the value of these loans, the value of the collateral upholding these loans that are being given to it by the private equity firms that are then making the loans out there. And a lot of this has to do with software companies that have been borrowing money and took a beating in the stock market because of AI, and valuations have come down. And there's a lot of uncertainty about the future of a lot of these software companies because supposedly AI will replace them. And whether that's valid or not, this is now filtered down to the level of the banks, JP Morgan Chase. So all these particular markdowns have to do with software company loans. But we've also seen significantly high redemptions from private equity firms like Blue Owl and Blackstone. And, I'm not saying we're heading towards a financial crisis, but there's something to watch. These are the kind of things that were happening a year before the financial crisis happened in 2007. This was happening in 2007 before the financial crisis of 2008. It's the kind of stuff you saw. If oil prices going up slows down the economy, you could see other problems on the private lending side, businesses having problems paying off their debts and so on. I expected some of this to happen during COVID, and it didn't. I think to a large extent because the government basically bailed out everybody, including some of the kind of zombie companies that were out there that were on the brink of going under, and the government gave them money, free money, which helped them stay afloat. One wonders what happens if there's a slowdown, significant slowdown in the economy, if there's a recession. I'm not saying there will be one, but if there's one, let's say because of oil prices or because of something else, something to watch is these private equity funds, these private credit funds, and the people who invested in and the people who've lent them money. All right. Let's see. Welfare. I've told you many times about everybody makes a big deal out of the welfare fraud, autism fraud, welfare fraud in Minneapolis, and it's horrible what happened in Minneapolis mainly generated from the Somali community there. But they made a big deal out of it because I believe it was the Somalis. But now, as investigations are happening around the country, what I expected, what I told you would happen is happening. They're discovering fraud everywhere. I mean, one of the main sources of fraud is autism therapy businesses that get money to treat autism from Medicaid, from the government. An example of this is a company in Indiana run by a regular American, not an immigrant and not dark-skinned, it appears. This woman, Megan Mitchell, started her business in 2019. And, she started a piece-by-piece autism center. And by 2023, she was getting $29 million a year from Medicaid, treating about 84 patients. Just to give you a sense of that, that's $340,000 a year. A child, $340,000 a child. Now, this is not some high-tech, sophisticated, very high-priced, super-duper doctors or everything. No, most of the stuff they do here is stuff that you don't even need a high school degree in order to do. They were charging for some of their therapists dealing with these kids $640 an hour. Wouldn't you like a job that paid $640 an hour? Well, you can have one, thanks to the U.S. government. I mean, Mitchell claims her company complied with all of Indiana's rules, and the state never objected to her prices. She says, I don't think Indiana really had any oversight, or not much. Of course, as a consequence of that, she was raking in $29 million a year. It allowed her to buy a nice house in Florida, a $600,000 waterfront house along a river in Indiana. I mean, yeah, all Medicaid. And this is all over the country. I mean, the number of companies offering therapy, individualized treatments, has skyrocketed as the number of diagnosis of, and there's an incentive here, of autism, particularly mild forms of autism, has skyrocketed. Direct payments of state Medicaid programs to autism therapy providers grew to $2.2 billion in 2023 from $660 million just 4 years earlier. So it went up by, threefold, more than threefold. Great business to be in. Get taxpayer money to do this, right? So, I mean, Medicaid fraud happened in Minneapolis, no question, but it's happening all over the country. Everywhere you look, if you dig a little bit, you will find massive fraud. Welfare, Medicaid, any big, large, generous government program, there's going to be massive amounts of fraud. This is what Doge should have found. This is where the fraud really is. It's not in Washington, D.C. It's in all these applications. It's in all these, and it's a lot of little things. A lot of little things. You're not going to find it on a computer in D.C. You're going to have to go into the trenches and, find it in all these different places. Another example of this, and this to CBS's credit, CBS under Barry Weiss, this is an investigation CBS ran in Los Angeles, and I already reported on this story a couple of weeks ago, maybe longer. But CBS has now run a big thing about this, a show about this, and this has to do with hospice care in California, in Los Angeles. Right. So again, Medicare. This is Medicare, not Medicaid. Medicare is federally administered, and hospices must be certified in order to get reimbursements from Medicare. Medicare will fund your hospice treatment. but it's the state that issues the licenses for hospices to operate. 3 years ago, California state auditors sounded the alarm that Los Angeles County had seen a 1,500% increase in hospice companies since 2010. I mean, more people are getting old, but not that many people. More than 6 times the national average, this growth, relative to its elderly population. Auditors estimated LA County hospices overbilled Medicare by $105 million in a single year. Right. They claim to have, for example, high rates of terminally ill patients. Hospice is usually terminally ill. And yet, many of the patients they billed for were discharged alive. How did that happen? It's a miracle. The state auditor notes hospice care treats pain and other symptoms associated with terminal disease, rather than attempting to cure the disease when a cure is no longer possible or when the burdens of curative treatment outweigh the benefits. So taxpayers are being massively fleeced. CBS reports, quote, the state says it proceeded to investigate after the auditor's report and revoke the licenses of 280 hospices. But since then, the problem has continued to fester. CBS News examined the businesses and financial records of every hospice currently operating in LA County, applying the same indicators identified by the state. Indicators of fraud have not stopped. In fact, they've grown. The CBS News analysis reveals that over 700 of the roughly 1,800 hospices in LA County trigger multiple red flags for fraud as defined by the state. CBS reached out to Governor Newsom's office. A spokesman sent us a January 2026 statement, which reads in part, under Governor Newsom's administration, California has cracked down on hospice fraud, launching partnerships across state agencies, all that bullshit, right? So, yep. There is so much of this, and now some of the fraud is associated with the COVID pandemic, all the COVID pandemic stuff, all the benefits that were distributed during the COVID pandemic. So here's an example. This is from Chicago. A South suburban man was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison Tuesday in a massive $14 million fraud scheme where he collected kickbacks for filing more than 1,500 bogus loan applications at the height of COVID-19 pandemic. The 122-month term handed down was believed to be the longest sentence for any case in U.S. District Court in Chicago related to the country's Payback Protection Program. You remember that? Which funded emergency loans designed to give financial relief to small business owners and others during the pandemic. There was massive fraud and abuse regarding the PPP. So, yeah, the more you look, the more you'll find much of your taxpayer money gone because of some of this fraud. All right, finally, let's talk about housing some more. We talked about this the other day, but the 21st Century Road to Housing Act looks like it's going to pass the Senate. Now, it has some good stuff in it. It has some stuff that is targeted at making it easier for homes to be built. It reduces the amount of environmental kind of regulation that applies to home builders when they want to build new neighborhoods. But the reality is that most housing regulations occur at the state and local level, so it's going to have very little impact. But it is reduced regulation, right? It also reduces regulations on manufactured housing. You know, from the 1950s, there was into the early 1970s, there was a big push to have manufactured housing, that is, lower the cost of housing by having pieces of it manufactured in advance and just assembled on the place. And that has been regulated out of existence. There's very little of that going on in America today. Indeed, by some accounts, in the early 1970s, a majority of new homes were factory built, modular, mobile, but coming in from the factory. That has died, and with it, increased productivity. Increased productivity has died in home building. So, okay, that's a little regulatory relief. That's good. We're always for regulatory relief. And there's also kind of all kinds of other small incentives to free up land at the local level for local municipalities too. So there's some good stuff in the bill. Nothing dramatic, nothing that's earth-shattering, but some good stuff. And then there's some garbage. I mean, what's become now a super popular idea is Section 901 of this new bill. It's called Homes Are for People, Not Corporations, which restricts the purchase of new single-family homes by large institutional investors. This is something Elizabeth Warren was pushing for a long time, but is only in the bill because Trump became a huge fan of this. So it cuts off institutional home investors from insurance and VA guarantees and all, if any, and all of this. Basically, also imposes a 7-year mandatory divestiture rule, forcing institutional investors to convert rental homes to owner-occupied units after 7 years. So if a corporation owns a bunch of homes, they have to sell them. Now, remember, people are living in those homes. They're renting, not owning. But who said that owning is better than renting? Renting allows you for more flexibility. Renting allows for more mobility. Renting might be cheaper. And yet what this bill really wants to do is destroy the rental market for single-family homes. Nobody objects to institutional investors buying apartment buildings or commercial real estate. But when it comes to single-family homes, oh my God, that is a no-no. That must not be allowed. That is nuts. You know, they can buy apartments, hotels, not family homes. That's the American dream. So what you'll get is a shrinkage of the amount of properties available for rent. Force people to buy when they might not want to. Which is not necessarily good for worker mobility, for affordability, for what people can afford. And the reality is, as I've said many times on the show, institutional investors own a tiny number of homes. So even if all of these homes are going to be now for sale, it's not going to change prices significantly. It's just populist stupidity. Something that is just encourage people, that Trump can use in his campaign speeches, Elizabeth Warren. Whenever Elizabeth Warren and Donald Trump agree on something, you have to be suspicious. In addition, this will kill all construction of new homes for rental, which is it's not a big segment of the market, small one, but construction of homes will go down. And that'll have a negative impact on home prices over the long run. So it's just an absurd policy, again, done for purely populist, soundbitey reasons with no economic justification. This is what Republicans have become. They become, Elizabeth Warren. This will pass the Senate by a big margin. Maybe Rand Paul will vote against it, but basically everybody else is for it. I told you about rents declining in Austin significantly. Well, there's a list of where rents are declining the fastest in the country and where they're going up the most in the country. And it's pretty straightforward. They're going down dramatically in places that allow build. Florida, Texas, Colorado, North Carolina, and Arizona. Savannah, Georgia makes the list, right? That's where rents are going down. Rents are going up. California, Illinois, Oregon, New York, Virginia, Kansas, Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania. So a bunch of states. But the down is where they allow for building. And you can see that by the fact that in the markets where rents are going down, they have dramatically increased the amount of homes available for rent. So among the top 15 markets cutting rents, the median supply growth, so the growth in supply of available units was 5.1%, which is very high. Whereas the ones that saw an increase in rents, the median supply growth was just 0.6%. So again, I mean, this is not hard. This is straightforward economics, but this is just, this is, nobody ever learns. You want a government solution, you want a top-down solution. You don't want to pay attention to economic principles. This is populism, socialism, leftism, statism, and altruism. So some people are being sacrificed, but a lot of it is just lobbying, right? If you own a home in one of these areas, you don't want prices to come down. You want prices to go up because your equity value will go up. So you vote to restrict the supply. So it's this, self-destructive behavior that is deemed to be self-interested, but it's overall self-destructive because it overall increases the power of the state, which is going to hurt you one way or the other. All right. That is the news for today, Wednesday, March 11th. We went for a long time. So let me just remind you that if you value my presentation of the news, as quite a few of you seem to do because the viewership numbers are high, please step in with some financial support, value for value. You can do a sticker. You can ask a question. And by asking a question, you can shape the topics that I'm going to be discussing now that I'm going to answer your Super Chat questions. So thank you for doing that. You can ask about anything, the war, the economy, the stuff we've talked about or stuff you've read about that we haven't talked about. So whatever you feel like you can ask. I know there's a lot of people asking questions in the chat. Doesn't work that way. I don't answer questions from the chat. I answer all questions that are asked in the Super Chat. So if you want your questions answered, if you want me to respond, then Super Chats, you can do $2. You can do $500. Anything between, I think, 99 cents and $500 is possible. So it's not that you can't afford it. Everybody can afford 99 cents. So just ask a question in the Super Chat, and I will answer. I promise to answer all questions, even ones I don't like. Jump in and do that. In the meantime, those of you who don't have questions, but we're still getting value from this show and want to trade, want to show value for value, then you can jump in with a Super Chat, with a sticker where you don't have to ask a question. So again, same button at the bottom. AM Akib, you keep asking the same question. You want me to answer the question, ask it in the Super Chat, and I will. But I won't answer it as long as it's not in the Super Chat. Can't follow all the questions in the thing. All right, Kali Voltaire, $20. Thank you, Kali. Really appreciate that. Grant, thank you for the sticker. Mary Aline, thank you for the sticker. Let's see. West, I think, did $50. I saw West do $50 here. West, thank you as always for the $50. Darlene, Mike Dial, all of you, thank you for the stickers. I really appreciate it. That's a great way to support the show without asking a question. And thank you for all the people who've asked a question. Now, we've got goals for every hour. We're almost at the first hour goal, but we are well into the second hour, and we might, if we get enough questions, we might make it into the third hour. So please consider making a contribution so we can keep on track for the show goals, for the weekly goals, for the monthly goals. We want to stay on track. I deliver these every day, often from all kinds of places around the world. Keep you informed, help you avoid having to watch television news and read the newspapers, because those are not pleasant activities. All right, let me also remind you of the Ayn Rand Institute as a sponsor. They've got a conference in Porto, Portugal, in mid-April. Check it out, aynrand.org/start here. Start here, aynrand.org/start here. You can get a discount on the fee for the conference, 10% discount. The discount code is 26YBS10, 26YBS10. It's going to be a lot of fun. The conference. So please jump in and join us for that. Alex Epstein is the #1 authority on all things energy. Check him out, alexepstein.substack.com. Alex is one of the most brilliant people I know, and he's applying that brilliance to the issue of energy and to the political world that we live in. You'll learn so much about what's going on and what's happening. Let's see, what else? hendershotwealth.com/YBS, hendershotwealth.com/YBS. Hendershot Wealth has tools, financial investment tools that makes it possible for you to not pay capital gains taxes, to offset the capital gains taxes. It's really brilliant. It's really cool. Check out my interview with Robert on my on YouTube. On YouTube under playlists, sponsor playlists, interview with Robert Hendershot. You can find it there. So check that out. And then finally, defendersofcapitalism.com, defendersofcapitalism.com, a great program defending capitalism, moral, political, economic, philosophical, by my friend Michael Williams. And check that out and see, maybe you can bring Defenders of Capitalism to your business, to your community, to your trade organization, whatever. All right. Selfish subscriber just did $50 sticker. Thank you, selfish subscriber. And it means a lot from somebody called Selfish Subscriber. He is contributing $50 to the Yaron Brook Show, I assume, because he's selfish. That's the way I like it. And Roland Swiss francs have come in as well. Thank you, Roland. Really appreciate that. So thank you guys for the support. And we've crossed the first hour goal. So we're on our way to the second hour goal. I appreciate it. Don't forget, one way to support the show without being here live is to become a supporter, a monthly supporter on Patreon. Again, you can do anywhere from $2 to $1,000. Patreon.com, Yaron Brook Show, and become a monthly supporter. Really, really, really appreciate that. That's the steady money that comes in every month on a regular basis. I would love to see that grow by about 50% this next year. So if we chip away at it slowly, that'd be great. If there's anybody out there who can do $100, $250 a month, something like that, that would be amazing. That's the kind of support that the show really needs. Of course, I value the $2, $10, $25 as well. All right. Let's go to our questions. Let's start with Michael. Michael, is nuclear power being legalized because it's needed to power AI, or because Alex Epstein's influence, the powers seem to be impressed with Alex? I think it's a combination of a number of different things. I think it's a combination of people realizing across the world, really, including in Europe, surprisingly, that nuclear power is safe and is needed, and that I think people are slowly realizing that wind and solar are not a solution. They're actually a problem. Now, Alex has highlighted that and brought a moral fervor to it that never existed before. and that I certainly think is influencing things in the United States, and I think by extension influencing things even in Europe. So I do think Alex has had an impact. So it's the need plus Alex and the people who've been influenced by Alex pushing for this that has had an impact. So absolutely. I mean, Alex is doing, an amazing job and has the ear of very, very influential people, both in the business world and in government. Primarily in the US, but I think by extension, internationally. All right, Thomas. Hey, Thomas. Sources in the Trump administration claim that he really seemed to think this was essentially another Venezuela. Drop lots of bombs, take out the leader, and wait for the regime to kneel before Trump and beg for mercy. Yeah, because he can't think of a ideologue. The fact that somebody would be willing to die for their ideology, or their religion in this case, Trump can't conceive of that. He is a power, he is all about momentary satisfaction. He's a thug. He's a mafia boss. Mafia bosses know that they can always cut a deal with other mafia bosses, particularly once they show how strong they are, because no other mafia boss wants to die. But when you are dealing with Islamists, they're willing to die. They're willing to die for the cause. And Trump cannot conceive of that. To him, it's all like Venezuela. And Venezuela went so smoothly, why wouldn't it go well in Iran? If they're all thugs, then I know how to deal with thugs. You take out the top guy, and the people underneath him immediately cut a deal because they want to live. Well, not if you're an Islamist who believes in 72 virgins and you'll get the benefits from God in heaven for eternity. Then you're not going to cut a deal. But again, a Trump mentality cannot conceive of that. He cannot even think in those terms. And there's nobody around him that would tell him that. Now, I think Rubio and even Hegseth can conceive of it because they're religious enough to know what it entails. Trump cannot. He just cannot. That's what happens when you appoint basically somebody with the mentality of a mafia boss to be president of the United States. Jennifer, here's a joke we can relate to. Word of the day, déjà-poo, the feeling that we've heard the same shit before. That's pretty funny. Yes, that is one that we can definitely relate to because the shit just repeats itself over and over and over and over and over again. And it's, the same rotten philosophy guiding what people are doing and how they behave and what they do. Michael says, have you been to Guangzhou, China? Incredibly impressive city. Yes, I have been to Guangzhou. It is an incredibly impressive city. I've been there twice. But the whole region, if you go from Guangzhou to Shenzhen to Dongguan, that whole area, just out, basically adjacent to Hong Kong. The train ride from there to Hong Kong is not it takes a few hours, but it's adjacent given the size of China. That was the first area that was deemed a free trade zone. In the 1980s, maybe even late 70s, early 80s, and it boomed. It boomed since then. So it's the first zone in China to be granted some economic freedom. And it's because it succeeded so much that other parts of China were granted the same kind of economic freedom. So, Michael, are you in Guangzhou? I'm curious. Michael says, how can Trump be successful in this Iran campaign? How can Trump ever be successful in this Iran campaign? He's a narcissist with no ability to think long range or in principle. Yeah, but the Iranians are pathetic. The Iranians are super weak. They could collapse at any moment. So, when you're a bully, you can beat up on weak people, even if you can't think long term. And I think there are people at the Pentagon that can't think. The people who buy the weapons and, the generals, they can think. Obviously not perfectly because they missed the Straits of Hormuz, but that's Trump's fault. Because he just wanted to jump in and he believed, again, that this would be like Venezuela. It would be a few days and they'd surrender and that would be it. Eric asked, do you know Tom Bilyeu? He mentioned Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged often in his podcast, Impact Theory. Any thoughts? No, I don't know him. Don't know him. But I notice a lot of people mention Ayn Rand, but it would be interesting to find out who he is. I'll copy this and see if maybe the Institute can contact him or something. Thanks, Eric. Ollie says value for value. Thank you, Ollie. Appreciate that. Harrison says, thoughts on The Sky is Ours by Feed Rate Command. I haven't listened to it. I haven't listened to it yet. So I'm trying to, you asked me to, but that's, you're sponsoring a song, but it takes me a while to do that. Right? It can take me weeks before I actually give my thoughts. So you're going to have to be patient. You don't have to ask again. I appreciate the $5, but you don't have to ask again. I will get to it, I promise. Remo, for your interview with Andrew Fox was great. Thank you, Remo. I appreciate that. Thanks for all the value, Remo says. Thank you, Remo. Harrison says, Jack Lang, the guy who had a bomb thrown at him in New York City, is the same guy leftists tried to stab at his anti-Somali protest in Minneapolis. I think they will get him eventually. It seems like he's egging them on, and given his views, I'm not saying it's justified. I'm just saying it seems like he's egging them on, and he goes to all the places where they might get him. Paul, do you think that Iran would be desperate if they thought they will lose the war and destroy their own oil capacity? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's part of their MO. But I could be wrong. I just don't think that that's how they would go out. Crypto Fanatic says, where can I read the Objectivist list of individual rights? How do they differ from the U.S. Bill of Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Well, they differ certainly from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But there is no list of rights, because there is no list of rights. Basically, there's one right. There's only one right. That's the list. You have a right to life, which means you have a right to take actions, to act in pursuit of your own values using your own mind. That's it. And the right to property is a derivative of the right to life, because in acting, you will create stuff, you will gain through your work property, and as part of your right to life, that is yours because you created it. So right to property is a derivative of the right to life. Right of free speech is the same thing. It's a derivative of the right to life. You have a right to live, act. Part of that action is speaking. It's writing. It's expressing yourself. You have a right to liberty, which is the right to think and speak, and you have a right to pursue happiness, which is broad, right? You have a right to act on your own behalf. You have a right to pursue your values using your mind, your reason, free of coercion. That's the only right you have. But that's pretty broad. Basically, you have the right to everything that you do not acquire through the use of force by violating other people's rights. So the right to life is go live, and the government will protect you from force, coercion. That's what it means. So there's no list. For example, you have a right, there's a right to health care, right? What's the right to health care? You have a right to negotiate whatever terms you can with whatever doctor is willing to negotiate with you and to get any treatment that you and the doctor agree to based on the negotiations. You have a right to negotiate and as a consequence, negotiate with pharmaceutical companies to get whatever drug you want to get. That's kind of the right to healthcare. The right to a home is the right to go out there and, negotiate and buy a home. But the only way to do that is voluntarily engage with other people there's a sense in which if it's a right to action, it's a right to all action. Short of that which involves using force on other people. I would highly recommend for that reading Man's Rights. It's an essay that is at the end of Virtue of Selfishness, that's the book, or Capitalism Not Known Ideal, another book of Ayn Rand's essays. So you can find the essay dealing with rights at the back of that essay. Jason, do you think the Fed might cut 25 basis points given oil and war this month? Predictive markets, $5 on yes, pays 120. Ooh. I don't know. I mean, the good news was the CPI number came in very low yesterday, lower than expected. The job market is very bad. I mean, no negative job growth in February and revising downwards of previous months. I mean, the amount of jobs revised down over the last year has just been stunning. So we're in what they call a job recession. There's certainly a problem with job creation in the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is not creating jobs. Part of that is kicking out the illegal immigrants. So that would suggest, those two things would suggest, yes, they would cut 25 basis points. Inflation seems to be under control. CPI at least. And jobs are problematic. That would be the rationale. Cutting interest rates is not going to affect oil prices, one way or the other. So oil prices will go up. Affecting other prices will go up irrespective of interest rates. Gloria says, the IRGC heard I moved to California, so now they're threatening to attack it. My bad. Thanks for covering the war, Yaron. I cannot stand mainstream news coverage of the war and their pessimism. Thank you, Gloria. I really appreciate that. Sorry the IRGC is after you. But luckily, you're in a big state. It's going to be hard for them to find you. So thank you for watching my show, and thank you for supporting it. M. Akib, get a job. I guess Harrison is paying for your question. What do you think of David Deutsch's attempt to define a rational epistemology? I mean, I think he's fundamentally wrong in his entire approach to epistemology. I think Ayn Rand's already defined a rational epistemology, and they differ dramatically. Ayn Rand starts with the senses and starts with induction. And induction is our main means of knowing, of discovering new knowledge. Deutsch, like Popper, starts with speculation, starts with imagination, starts with coming up with an explanation just out of nowhere in your mind and then testing it. And I think that's really wrong. You don't start in the mind. You start in reality. The mind is integrating something. The mind is aware of something. Human consciousness is awareness of what? It's awareness of reality. That's where all knowledge starts. All knowledge starts in reality. Now, it's not that reality imprints itself on our mind. So I agree with Deutsch about the rejection of intrinsicism, that somehow knowledge imprints itself. And I agree with him about his objection to subjectivism. But Ayn Rand has solved that problem with this idea of the mind integrating the facts of reality. That is what real knowledge is. And so I disagree with Deutsch. I mean, I admire Deutsch, a lot of what Deutsch does. I admire a lot of his work. but I disagree with him about this. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you to all the viewers and people here. I appreciate your support. I will see you, I hope, tomorrow. No guarantees. I'll be in Honduras. I'll be in Prospera in Honduras. We'll see what the internet connection is like. I assume it's going to be good because it's Prospera, but I can't guarantee that. So if it is good, I will do a show tomorrow. If it isn't good, I won't. And the same for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, and Monday, there will be no shows. So wish me luck. I pray to the Wi-Fi gods. And hopefully, I'll be with you from Central America tomorrow. Bye, everybody.